Hello, students. Hope you all are doing good. Today, we are going to start with our chapter number 8 of history, that is Women and Reform. Here in this chapter, we will be getting to know more about it, what women had to go through in the earlier times, and who were the people who just came across to help them overcome these kind of evil practices which were prevailing in the society in the earlier times. The 19th century was a period of great transformation in India. The introduction of Western education brought in a new stream of consciousness, and the educated Indians began to resist the then existing social conditions. Like people were more into kind of education and all. People started prevailing education, receiving education from different institutions. They were more aware and active regarding and keeping the education factor into mind. The exposure to a new set of values and beliefs inspired by humanism and rationalism prompted that to identify the social inequalities persistent in their surroundings and fight against them. Means people were forced to get education because that's the only way that in by which they can sustain their lives and can move further. Most of these reforms had some common goals such as the spread of education, women's emancipation, and eradication of the caste system. Emancipation is a process in which one is set free from the rule of another, which is kind of forceful rule, and the women were set free from the forceful rule of their husbands and of their families, what kind of bridal families I'm talking about, and some social activities used to prevail and exist in the earlier times. Keeping that into consideration, so many people came forward, and those people are called known as reformers. They came up, they showed up from somewhere, and then they tried their level best to eradicate and remove these kind of evil practices from the society. The condition of women in 19th century in India was different from what it is today. Earlier, women had to face a lot of problems. Females were not given preference. They were not having any priority. They were neither sent to school nor could they claim any rights over the property. They were not given the conditions and the rights to go to school, neither they were given any priority or property. Instead, they were considered to a burden on the society, which had to be taken over and then married off at the earliest opportunity. They were earlier child marriages as well. Many of them would become widows and live the remainder of their lives in a pitiful conditions. Widows are the ones whose husband dies, and the custom of polygamy, that is having more than one wife, was widely practiced. Polygamy was a practice in which a husband can have more than one wife. That was also a very pitiful act which used to prevail in the society early times. And in some part of the country, the custom of sati was also practiced. Sati was a practice in which in after the death of the husband of the kind of widow was suggested to die along with her, burn along with the dead body of the on the funeral pyre of her dead husband. In that regard, that was known as Sati Pratha. Now, working towards change, what are the changes and how and who brought them? The beginning of the 19th century saw the emergence of a culture of public debate and discussion. People got into public debates and discussions. They started opening up in front of their other people and started putting up their conditions and whatever they feel. The ideas of humanism and rationalism on the one hand and print revolution on the other set the stage for the development. People were more into reading books as print development and print era got into the consideration. Through newspapers, magazines, pamphlets, and books, people were able to participate in various debates on social, political issues. They were more into all these kind of things because that was the most important part that prevailed in that society. Most of the participants were members of the educated urban middle class families. It was this section of the society that provided leadership to the Indian nationalist movement, and mostly leadership came into India because of these middle class, educated urban middle class people. And many of them felt that social change was necessary for bringing about a political change, and thus directed their attention and energy to undertake large social scale social reforms. Means they just focused on one thing, and that was to bring back the harmony and make more and more people aware about what their rights are. The debates that dominated the public sphere in 19th century India were often initiated by the leading reformers. Leading reformers means the reformers like leaders like Lala Lajpat Rai, Mahatma Gandhi, and many more there. Rajaram Mohan Roy was one of the earliest reformers who fought for social cause during his time. He was the one who initiated everything, and he just made sure that yeah, everything is getting served with the proper form. In the year like 1732 to 1833, He believed that the best way to bring change was to pursue people to give the old practices and adopt a new way of life. He believed that yes, the best way with which one can change is to just let them know that yes, how they can change and what's the best that they can do for themselves. And this is how, like in some way or another, French Revolution also inspired them to cooperate the changes and move further with a new thought and new idea of life. Also, he supported the Western education. He believed that contact with Western ideas and philosophy would bring equality and freedom in the Indian society, as he was a kind of supporter of Western education because he knew that if someone and somewhere, if people will be educated, then nobody will be able to blame them for anything because they will have the knowledge, they will have the tendency to acquire what is right and what is wrong. Abolition of sati means how sati got stopped. Sati system was prevalent in many parts of India. As I told you that it was a practice of burning a widow on the funeral pyre of her dead husband. As per the Sati system, the widow of the deceased was forced to immolate herself on the pyre of her husband. Pyre means chitta. And Raja Ram Mohan Roy, who was one of the most pronounced voices against gender inequality, campaigned throughout India to put a ban on the practice of sati. He was the one who took an initiative to stop this, make this activity stop. And well versed in many languages, Rajaram Mohan Roy tried to convince people with the ancient Indian scriptures and Hinduism did not approve any kind of custom of the sati. He told people that yes, in any of the Hinduism books, it's never written. There's nowhere written that yes, a widow should be burned alive on the funeral pyre of her husband. Because of him only, we were able to get and set India free from all these kind of prevalent activities which were existing. And this was a very powerful approach to elevate societies from social levels. And he was successful up to some extent. And because of him only, today we are free from this sati practice. During the 19th century, the British also started criticizing the Indian customs and rituals. They agreed with Rajaram Mohan Roy, who was running a signature campaign against the practice of sati. Finally, Governor General William Bentinck to the initiative to pass a law in 1829 which abolished the sati system. So many people were there. Rajaram Mohan Roy was taking his steps and initiatives, but apart from that, there was a rule passed by General William Bentinck that now in 1829, since 1829, nobody will be getting involved into the practice of sati, and if anybody will be found getting indulged into such kind of activities, then will be punished with a fine and with so many punishments. And our next heading is widow remarriage. Widow remarriage means like the widows whose husbands and deceased got deceased, like they were allowed after a lot of time and a lot of practice by the reformers, they were finally allowed to remarry. For a woman in the 19th century, embracing death on the pyre of her husband was not the only horror in her life. Widows who were allowed to live were forced into a life of deprivation and suffering. They were not allowed to go anywhere. They're not allowed to wear colorful saris and cloth. They were not even allowed to wear bangles. They were not even allowed to wear any colorful life. So there were many more things which were prevailing, and they were not leading a good life. So keeping that into consideration, and the like Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar came forward along with so many other reformers that yes, this is not a right way of keeping someone in your house. You should change the way. Rajaram Mohan Roy tried to influence public opinion in favor of widow remarriage. However, the chief proponent of this cause was Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar, though there were two people who played a vital role in that: Rajaram Mohan Roy and Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar, who, like Rajaram Mohan Roy, quoted some scriptures to prove that widow remarriage was not against the traditional Hindu religion. He told all the people over there, that yes, it's not a part. Anyone can marry again. It's not a part of life that yes, after the death of the deceased of the person of a spouse, the persons should stop their life. It's nowhere written. Largely due to the efforts, the British government passed the Widow Remarriage Act in 1856. Finally, and in fact, Vidyasagar arranged for his own son to marry a widow, and his own son, married a widow only. Those who were against widow remarriage boycotted him. However, he never bowed down to the social pressure, and like after getting so many kind of incriminations, he was never stopped by anything because his aims and his mottos were very good and very high. By the mid 19th century, the movement support of widow remarriage spread in other parts of the country. The Prarthana Samaj in Maharashtra organized a movement in support of the widow remarriage, which was initiated by Mahadev Govind Ranade and R.G. Bhandarkar. These two people were there also, who just came forward in support of widow remarriage because they were the ones who are willing to go for that one. And Pratna Samaj was formed in Maharashtra by these two mid supporters and the mid 19th century, and they just played a vital role in shaping and supporting widow remarriage. And Virsalingam Pantulu led a similar movement in Madras presidency, while in northern India, Dayanand Saraswati, the founder of Arya Samaj, emerged as a strong supporter of widow remarriage. These are the people who just came forward in support of widow remarriage because they knew somewhere that yes, the initiative which have been taken by Ishu Chandra Vidyasagar and by other people are worth keeping trying. However, the acceptability of newly married widows in mainstream society remained a challenge. The conservation group continued to oppose widow remarriage because there were so many people who were not in favor, and still, even after the remarriage of widows, people were not able to accept, and they were still not accepting. But what was the matter then? What actually mattered was the happiness of the widow, and yes, they were happy with their lives after getting into a family that they have always wanted. Now, the issue was that fight against child marriage. Child marriage was another issue of debate. A host of reformers spoke against the custom of marrying off girls at an early age, which was actually an implicable task at the time, but people were not ready to listen to them. The Brahmo Samaj in Bengal and the Prarthana Samaj in Maharashtra and most and many other individual reformers like Rajaram Mohan Roy, Veer Salingam, Jyoti Rai Phule, and tried to make people aware of the social evil. However, their job was not easy because it's never easy to get something done on a peculiar time. And Behramji Malabari, a Parsi reformer, was a pioneer in moving like the age of consent bill in 1891. The age of consent for girls was increased to 12 years by this bill. None of the girls were allowed. However, there towards the end of the 19th century, the British government became reluctant to interfere with the social customs of India as they feared it might encourage anti-British sentiments. It was only in 1929 that the Child Marriage Restraint Act was passed, which raised the age of consent for girls to 14 years. From 12 to 14, the age was shifted to plus, and now it's 18 plus because like this is a very common term after which the girls should get married by their parents. Before then, that if they are allowed, then they will be considered that act will be considered as a kind of abolition of the child marriage act, and under that section the one who are involved and who is found guilty will be punished with jail and sentencement and a heavy fine. Now comes education of women. Social reformers strongly believed that education could change the status of women for the better. Yes, they were right. They not only highlighted the importance of educating girls, but many of them founded schools for their Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar, started many schools for the girls in Calcutta and in several districts of Bengal. Like they were knowing that yes, if they will be getting their girls and women's educated, then yes, by that they can change the condition of the society. Because of that, Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar came forward and set up many other institutions and schools and started Pratna Samaj also, and at many other places. He also wrote a wide array of books to promote basic education because that was the most important part. He knew it somewhere that yes, if he will be taking an initiative, then somewhere it will give him fruits of his wisdom. Some Europeans came forward in support of this cause too. John Eliot, Drinkwater Bethune, established a girls' school in Calcutta. Schools for girls were set up in many parts of the country. These people came forward and they set up schools in Calcutta and in many parts of the country by Indians as well as by Europeans. The Arya Samaj in Punjab and Pratna Samaj in Maharashtra played significant roles in spreading women's education. They too played a very vital role in like shaping the society and giving a kind of support to the women education system. And Jyotirao Phule and his wife Savitrabai Phule opened a number of schools in Maharashtra. They also showed their efforts. Despite the efforts of the reformers, Indians were reluctant to send their daughters to school. They feared that education would make their girls aware and question the Hindu customs and traditions. This was the only fear that they believed and that they feared because they believe that yes, if girls will get to know and get in more into education, then they will ask questions about the customs and traditions, which somewhere they also knew that they were wrong. Many were concerned about their girls passing through public places to reach the school. Public felt that people would have a bad influence on the girls, and they just had their idea that yes, people will be considering their parents wrong, and like it will be a kind of difficult for them to live in the society. This was also the reason that most of the educated women in the 19th century were taught at the home by their liberal fathers or husbands, and even like somewhere if they agreed and they were not allowed, they never allowed girls and women to move to the schools. They taught them the girls themselves. Now, coming on the next topic, that is women reformers. The 19th century India also witnessed the emergence of a small group of educated women who shared the new stream of consciousness and zeal for reform. Means some women came forward, like Savitribai Phule, Pandita Ramabai, and Rasundra Devi. They just came forward to help the persons and to show their talents and showcase their opportunities, that how well they can perform in the field if they are given the chance. Savitribai Phule worked with her husband in spreading education for girls and fighting against the caste system. She was the first Indian woman to become the headmistress of a school, which was worth appreciable at the time. Pandita Ramabai, after being widowed at a young age, educated herself and devoted her life to the social work. She was accorded the title of Pandita because of her immense knowledge in Sanskrit, which is worth appreciable at the time, because Ramabai founded the school for widows in Bombay and present day Mumbai. She was known one of the strongest voices against caste discrimination and untouchability. She wrote a book about the miserable condition of upper caste Hindu women, which was published well and was also known popular among the people. And Rasundra Devi of Bengal was the first woman to write an autobiography. Her work, Amar Jeevan, My Life, was published in 1876. By the 1880s, some women got the opportunity to enter universities also. They became professors, they became lecturers, and often they became the headmistress of the college. They started writing and publishing their views on the status of women in the society. They became writers as well. Tarabai Shinde wrote a book, Stri Purush Tulna, a comparison between women and men, in which she criticized the differential treatment of men and women in the society, because she just compared all the tasks and all the places where men and women were compared. From the early 20th century, women began to demand adult suffrage. Adult suffrage was a term in which people were there and they just asked for their rights. And some of them joined the nationalist movement. Sarojini Naidu, who came from a Bengali family in Hyderabad, was a political activist and a poet. She wrote so many places and so many poems like Nightingale and so many other poems and all. She took an active part in India's struggle against the British and was the first Indian woman to preside over the annual session in the Indian National Congress in 1925. She was considered as one of the most prominent lady of the time till date. Through the early Though the early reformers of the 20th century were English educated Hindus, the winds of change were felt by the Muslims as well. Not only Hindus but also Muslims came forward. In aristocratic Muslim families of North India, girls were taught to read the Quran and Arabic. Reformer Mumtaz Ali interpreted the verses from the Quran to argue for the education of the girls. She also mentioned that yes, only men are allowed in Muslim community to have the education. We should also have the education and we deserve it. The first Urdu novel came by the late 19th century and it encouraged women to read in the language they knew. The Begums of Bhopal founded a primary school for girls at Aligarh in the early 20th century. Begum Rokeya Shekhawat Hussain was an eminent educationist, social activist, and advocate of women's rights from Bengal during the early 20th century. She founded schools at Patna and Calcutta for Muslim girls because she was the one who has always been an active participant in the fields as compared to the women's and girls, and so that's why she always considered girls and women's before men's and boys, because she knew that somewhere like they can have their rights but girls can never come out. So she was an activist and she tried her best to get them served whatever they deserved. So students, this was all from my side. I hope you have understood the concept and the plot of the chapter, and if not, then please do access the internet for the further stuffs, access videos from YouTube, and please do go through the chapter once again and give it a thorough reading again and again. Study well, take care, stay safe, and stay home. Thank you.